What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the very end of what has been an amazing 2023 NFL draft season. We are here with my final draft grades, where we're going to go through division by division, team by team, pick by pick, talking about every single draft pick, grading every individual draft. I do want to say before we get started, we always get comments saying, draft grades are stupid. You're not an NFL GM. I trust my team's GM more. We don't know anything about these players until 3 years after they get drafted. Why are you watching then? Like, cool. You want to take that approach? That's fine. You want to have blind faith in your team's NFL GM? That's totally fine. I get it. But as a draft analyst, I have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours watching these players. I'm here to offer up my honest opinions on who got great value, who potentially took worse players ahead of better players, where I might have gone, and ultimately who had great drafts and is setting their team up for success into the future. It's a fun exercise. These are my honest opinions. Of course, I could be wrong, just like your team's GM could be wrong. It happens every year, and in fact, a lot of times my D and F graded picks turn out to be pretty damn stupid picks, and we knew it in real time. So I'm going to try and tell you who some of those picks might have been over the weekend, but ultimately I also am just here to talk about who these players are, how they fit with each team, and how I think they could project into the next few years. I have changed up my grading scale a little bit in a way that I think you guys are really going to appreciate. Now there's a much bigger emphasis on the first 3 rounds really being where the meat and potatoes of a draft are. That's where you're going to see those A, B, C, D, F grades, whereas into day 3, it's much more adding context to how I feel about the pick. I'll try to explain that a little bit as we go. You can also check out the criteria now in the description below. I think it's going to add a little bit of transparency and true consistency to these grades that I think a lot of you are going to really appreciate, and it's going to improve this exercise into the future. So let's get into it. I do ask, please just take a second to hit that like button down below. I really do appreciate it. It's a free and easy way to support my channel. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of the other 8 divisional draft grades or 7 other divisional draft grades videos we've got coming. We've got my deep dive series just around the corner, previewing in depth every single NFL team season. And I think that's the best I have to offer on this channel. So you're not going to want to miss that. You're not going to want to miss all my NFL content. You can join me on this quest for 100,000 subscribers this year. Would love to hit that goal. So hit that subscribe down below and let's get into it. With the Chicago Bears, who originally had the number 9 pick, Paris Johnson, I think, was very much their target, and unfortunately, the Arizona Cardinals jumped them to take Paris Johnson, and they had to kind of regroup and decide which tackle was going to be the best for them. And they end up taking Darnell Wright out of Tennessee, who is going to get a B grade from me. And, you know, I'm going to be honest, there was enough to actually give this a C based on my criteria for it. I think this was a little bit early, and I think there were other tackles, Peter Skoronski and Broderick Jones specifically, that I actually think were better prospects. But I will say, I added a note to the B grade that if you're sitting in the first round and you have a glaring need and you still address that need with a pretty damn good football player, I can still get behind the pick. And while I would have gone Broderick Jones, while I would have gone Peter Skoronski ahead of Darnell Wright, I still think it's a sound pick. The reason I like those other tackles better, the number one thing is I think Darnell Wright is overrated as a run blocker. I think he has dominant run blocking wins, especially in gap runs, which unfortunately for Chicago, they are a wide zone blocking scheme. So when you watch Darnell Wright really on the move, where he has to land his hands inside, stay square to his blocker, run his feet and sustain blocks, I actually think Darnell Wright is incredibly overrated in that regard. He throws his chest around and is going to have to be taught in this system how to be a much more consistent run blocker. He's got the tools to do it, but I have some concerns there. In pass protection, I think he's fine. He's not what Peter Skoronski is in pass protection, and I don't know if he ever will be. But again, I think this is a fine pick. There's just a couple things that I wanted to comment on there. Now, you get into day 2 of the draft, and I'm going to give the Gervin Dexter pick an A. I did have a 3rd round grade on Gervin Dexter, but you're talking about the end of the 2nd round and a really high upside defensive tackle for a team that really needed him here. He is one of the freakiest defensive tackles in this draft. If you just look at his physical profile, whether you're watching him on the field or his workout scores, reminds you a lot of Chris Jones. The weird thing with Gervin Dexter is one of the most unique things I've ever seen in any prospect. He plays football as if nobody ever taught him how to watch the ball and fire off the snap. He has the worst get-off grade I've ever given a defensive tackle. So you are talking about a freak athlete with a ton of potential here, filling a need, a huge need for the Chicago Bears. And someone that just needs to be coached up on a very specific point there. So if he can get off the ball a little bit quicker, continue to develop, you are getting a potential high-end starter in Gervin Dexter. So I think that's a great pick. And then you get Tyreek Stevenson 3 picks later. This is incredible. I had gone corner for the Bears very often in my own mock drafts, but when it's what I would do mock draft, Tyreek Stevenson was never there because I had Tyreek Stevenson as a top 35 player in this draft, someone that I was comfortable with in the first round. He is a physical monster at the line of scrimmage, press coverage. He is comfortable in phase down the field, really good in man coverage. They do like to play zone in Chicago, but that is something you can coach into a guy, which I think is much harder to coach into than man coverage. And I think this is an incredible steal for the Chicago Bears. Great work there by Poles, finding a player like that is a need for the Bears. That is going to make your number 3 corner better because Kyler Gordon, a second-round pick last year, I always felt like long-term projected better as a slot player. So he's going to slide inside, and you can go with Stevenson and Johnson on the outside, and you've got a really nice cornerback trio there, and I think Kyler Gordon's going to play much better in the slot for his skill set. So kind of makes 2 positions better. One of my favorite day 2 picks right there. And then they take Zach Pickens in the 3rd round. I was fine with this pick. I think it was a touch early. I did have a 3rd round grade on him, but this is the first pick in the 3rd round. I also would just question passing on Adebawore at this point, who's in your backyard at Northwestern. Both of those guys are going to be kind of undersized 3 technique types as pass rushers. Zach Pickens is a putrid run defender. I think he's a talented player, though. I can get behind this pick. I actually compared him, ironically, to Bilal Nichols, who you Bears fans are very familiar with. So I think this is a fine pick. And then we get into day 3 of the draft, and this is where I really mixed up my grading scale. You know, it's pretty difficult to criticize day 3 picks, but there are a few picks where I would have either gone in a different direction, which in rounds 4 and 5, I wanted to highlight those picks. And then there's true steals in the 3rd day of the draft, in my opinion. And then there's just a bunch of really solid picks, guys that'll be role players, special teamers, developmental pieces, and guys that I wouldn't necessarily bet on, but wouldn't necessarily be surprised if they turned into something either. So I wanted to separate kind of the importance of day 1 and day 2, really being where you make or break your draft, and then use day 3 as an opportunity to talk a little bit more about just how these guys fit. But anyway, Roschon Johnson in the 4th round, I think a very solid pick. He's going to be exactly what my pro comp for him is in Dante Foreman, who they signed out of Carolina. He's a bruising power back out of Texas, a really efficient short yardage back. Maybe a 5 out of 100 times he turns into a starter in a certain situation like Foreman had last year where the starter gets traded. But pretty quickly, a guy that does lack some of those high-end athletic traits to be viewed as a long-term starter. But in the 4th round, a really good backup running back. I like it. And then Tyler Scott at the end of the 4th round. I think this is a great pick. And I was not on the Tyler Scott really on day 2 hype. I had a 4th round grade on him. But what I will say about him is the way he moves and his athletic tools remind me a lot of a young Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney in a contract year. I don't know how much Tyler Scott's going to play in year 1, but man, I really could see him impressing the coaching staff, fighting his way up, and potentially giving you an excuse not to have to pay Darnell Mooney and getting a fairly similar player, a guy with speed and someone who showed some flashes as a deep threat. So I thought that was a great pick. They take Noah Sewell in the 5th round. I'm going to be honest. I think it's fine. I had a 5th to a 6th round grade on Noah Sewell. He's remarkably stiff as an athlete, but this is one of those situations where you had a player that I was really high on, Servasia Dennis, who I think could have been a much higher floor, higher ceiling pick for them. And this is where I want to take those opportunities to perhaps point out areas where I think teams may have made mistakes. And of course, I could be wrong. I'm just offering up my opinion here. But you're passing on a guy like Servasia Dennis. You're passing up a guy like D. Winters here. Even a guy like Henry To'oTo'o, I think, is a better version of what Noah Sewell is going to give you as a low upside, unathletic linebacker. But maybe he surprises me and can be a plus backup for them. But there were some players that I thought they should have taken instead there. But they definitely make up for it by taking Terrell Smith out of Minnesota. Really great pick here. I had a 4th to a 5th round grade on Terrell Smith. They get him at the very back end of the 5th round. Uber athletic, height, size, speed corner who really broke out in his 5th season at Minnesota. And just, kind of needs to continue refining his technique, keep amping up that reaction time at corner. But there's a lot of tools there and could even compete for a starting job at some point within the next couple of years. And then you get to the 7th round, a couple of athletes at defensive positions that they need. Defensive back, Kendall Williamson. We'll see if he's viewed as kind of a safety or a corner, slot corner. And then Travis Bell out of Kennesaw State. So totally fine with those picks, but I would just say temper your expectations a little bit. Overall, I did think Ryan Poles in year 2 had a fantastic draft. Just a couple nitpicks. I think Peter Skoronski in your backyard, Broderick Jones might have been better picks with that 10th spot. Zach Pickens, I would have also stayed home and gone with Adetomiwa Adebawore. And then the linebacker pick, in the 5th round, very, very nitpicky, but Servasia Dennis would have gotten me a lot more excited there than Noah Sewell. So overall, we're going A- for the Chicago Bears. Again, I could be wrong in those evaluations that I'm nitpicking, but I want to point out who those guys may have been that I would have gone with. This show is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to play fantasy football. The moment this draft is complete, Best Ball Mania 4 goes live, and it is the biggest fantasy football competition of all time. Not even kidding. It's only $25 to enter for your shot at $15 million in total prizes and a first place prize of $3 million. You won't want to miss out on this action. The best part is, because it's best ball format, all you have to do is draft your teams, which you can do at home on your phone thanks to the amazing Underdog app. In Best Ball Mania, you join the tournament, draft your team as you would in any normal fantasy football league, and your lineup is locked in once the draft is complete. No waivers, no trades. That's right, it is set it and forget it until it's time to collect your cash. Underdog automatically optimizes your lineup weekly to create the highest scoring option. What are you waiting for? Get signed up at UnderdogFantasy.com or via the App Store with promo code TFG, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code TFG for your shot at $15 million inside Best Ball Mania 4. All right, then we got the Detroit Lions up next, and I was really harsh on the Lions over draft weekend, and I will hold my hand up, and say that the Hendon Hooker criticism Saturday night, I really went in on this pick, and I believe in a lot of the things I said, but I had a long tweet that Lions fans had a lot of fun with. I imagine a lot of those people that saw that tweet are going to be here watching this video, and I think I probably overreacted a little bit to Hendon Hooker alone, but I reached that point because of how disappointed I was in this draft class as a whole. And look, I have defended Brad Holmes. I haven't just defended, I've pounded the table for the Detroit Lions as over the last 2 years doing a truly special job building this roster up. So as we get to this first round and why I'm so underwhelmed, I'm just genuinely disappointed in a team that was so close with that 6th overall pick to get a franchise-altering player, whether it's a game-changing defensive player or maybe packaging that pick to go and get a guy like Anthony Richardson, right? You have Jared Goff now, year 3 with this regime. When they inherited Jared Goff, the plan to me at the beginning always was, let's use Goff as a bridge, and when the opportunity presents itself, let's pounce on a potentially elite quarterback. And to me, that opportunity was right there with a chance to maybe move up for the number 3 pick for Anthony Richardson, and they decided not to do that. And if you're not going to do that, at least be getting a dominant pass rusher, a dominant corner, a dominant defensive tackle. They didn't do that. I will shout out my dude, Mike Renner, who had maybe a tweet of the year in the NFL media department saying the Detroit Lions went to a steakhouse and ordered a hamburger in the first round. And I couldn't agree more with that statement. At number 6, when Witherspoon comes off the board, they move down to 12 and take a running back. And not Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, because Lions fans are going to come in, because in a couple videos when I'm praising the Falcons for taking Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, very talented player, he had a first to second round grade for me. If I was picking 27 or 28 and all the true first round players were gone and I needed a running back, I could have justified him at the end of the first round for someone, and certainly in the early second. But at number 12, when there are pass rushers, Nolan Smith, Lucas Van Ness, Brian Brzee, Kalijah Kancey, and probably more notably, high-end premium cornerback prospects, 3 corners that were still top 10 players in this draft, in my opinion, Deonte Banks, Christian Gonzalez, and Joey Porter Jr. You pass on those guys that could have been transformative for your defense for Jahmyr Gibbs, who's going to be a rotational running back for the first year or two because you just paid David Montgomery to come in, so he's going to split carries. It's not like Bijan who's going to be coming in, you're going to run your offense through this guy. He's going to be a gadget running back. He's going to get 8 to 12 carries a game, probably 4 or 5 receptions. 3 times this year, he's probably going to take those like 60 yards for explosive touchdowns. Again, he's not a horrible player, but you have to factor in the positional value, that it's inarguable at this point that running back is mostly a function of the offensive line and the play calling outside of a few truly difference-making running backs, guys like Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, what I think Bijan Robinson's going to be. Jahmyr Gibbs is much more in that, Travis Etienne range. Potentially his floor could be something like what DeAndre Swift was. And you had DeAndre Swift when you made this pick. Now, I get that it's not a culture fit. DeAndre Swift is not as tough as Jahmyr Gibbs. I get it. But you had a legitimate opportunity to have a franchise-altering player gifted to you on the back end of that Matthew Stafford trade, and you take a running back, and it's not even Bijan Robinson. So I couldn't be any more underwhelmed with that pick. I really think this was the worst pick in the first round. And when you factor in the scale and the scope and the stakes, this might have been the worst pick in the entire NFL draft. And Lions fans are going to say, oh, but he's a good player. We got players here. Jack Campbell at 118. We got starters. Yeah, no shit, Lions fans. You had the 6th pick and the 18th pick. What do you think? You're picking Colby Sorstel in the first round? Like, come on now. Let's think about this a little bit more logically. So I have defended Brad Holmes and I have defended, Jack Campbell. But this one I can't defend. That pick gets a D. Jack Campbell at 18 is a little bit better for me. Again, you're passing up much more important positions. It's not that Jack Campbell's a massive reach. I had a second round evaluation on him, and he was my number 1 linebacker. So it's not that it's some massive reach, but it is earlier than I think you should have taken him. Linebacker is the running back of the defense, and it is not a position that has a massive impact on the game. Every metric, every analytic will tell you that, and just watch the game. Linebackers 3 or 4 times a year, you truly feel their presence throughout the course of a game. And, Campbell is a solid, sturdy player. He, again, is going to be a starter for them. He's going to be a good football player. But with what you could have had at 18, you could have had a dynamic wide receiver. We see the run of wide receivers come, with basically the next 4 picks after this. You could have had Joey Porter at this point, Deonte Banks, Brian Brzee, Kalijah Kancey, true, game-changing positions with real first-round talents. And you take, in my opinion, a second-round linebacker. And he is not a fantastic athlete. He does not everyone keeps comparing him to Luke Kuechly. It's ridiculous. Like, what? Because he's white? Like, what are we doing here? Luke Kuechly had blazing speed. He was a dynamic coverage player that could run stride for stride with athletic slot wide receivers down the field. He was a safety playing linebacker and a linebacker playing safety. That is not Jack Campbell. He is a defensive end playing linebacker. Like, he is 6'5", 249. He's stiff as a board. So he's a good player, man. But to take him at 18, it's just not good process. He's going to rack up tackles. He's going to be a fan favorite. I love how he fits in that culture, and I get why you'd be excited about him. But you could have had him at the top of the second round. I don't think anybody was taking Jack Campbell. This reminds me a lot of like when the Seattle Seahawks, after they had kind of established themselves, they really bought into their own hype and started reaching on guys that, he's a culture fit. We don't care what the board says. We need this player now. The Raiders, when John Gruden came in, they take the Clelin Ferrells of the world and the Jonathan Abrams of the world. And this first round screams that to me. And we said it on draft night for those drafts that they made a mistake. I feel very similarly about the Detroit Lions. It does get better as you go. So they take Sam Laporta in the second round. I was very surprised that they did not take Michael Mayer here. And I even had Musgrave over Sam Laporta. I'm not going to nitpick Musgrave versus Laporta, but I really can't get behind taking Laporta over Michael Mayer. That's why this isn't an A grade, but I do like them getting a tight end, another guy that I think he'll be a good player for them, but I think they could have had potentially an even better player there. I would have loved Michael Mayer for this team. But then you move up and get Brian Branch. And this is funny because the other thing is Lions fans are doing mental gymnastics, and they're like, well, just imagine if you took Brian Branch at 12 and pushed everybody down a little bit. That's not how that works, right? You're still looking at what you had and saying you aren't walking away with franchise-altering defensive players. I think Brian Branch is going to be a hell of a good, strong safety / defensive back / slot corner. But the first 4 positions that they took here were low-value positions, and they had immense draft capital, right? Running back, linebacker, tight end, and like kind of slot corner in this system. He might be a strong safety down the road. But the smart teams are drafting edge rushers, O-line, wide receivers, cornerbacks, and that's not what they're doing here. You can mix in a low-value position, but to do it with all 4 of these top picks, I don't love that. Now, the value is remarkable. You're getting a first-round player here in the middle of the second round. Of course, that is an incredible steal. I don't think he's going to play a whole lot in year 1 because they're so crowded back there. But as I always say, you don't draft for need after round 1. You're drafting best player available, and that's what they did here. He's going to eventually overtake Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Maybe he beats out Chauncey Gardner-Johnson because I think he's right there with him. But I can't argue with getting Brian Branch in the second round. That kind of, I don't think it saves this draft, but it definitely helps. And then let's talk about Hendon Hooker in the third round. I'm ultimately going to give this a C because I will stand by a lot of the things I said about this pick. Now, it's a value. Getting Hendon Hooker in the third round, it's almost a polar, not a polar opposite, an identical pick of when the Atlanta Falcons took Desmond Ridder at this point last year and all of those guys that started to slip. It's just too good a value to pass up at this point, and clearly they're just drafting best player available. I don't necessarily think they had like massive needs or some great players there that they should have taken instead. I would maybe argue for guys like Adebawore, who we talked about earlier, but my bigger problem with this pick is I genuinely believe, and I could be very wrong about this, but I genuinely believe that this bought Detroit another 3-year ticket to purgatory. We talked about the quarterback window earlier, talking about Detroit, where you've had Jared Goff for a couple of years. You've built up the team. It's time to put yourself in a good position to really make that push for that high upside quarterback. And I think Anthony Richardson could have been that guy this year. It didn't necessarily have to be. But the problem with Hendon Hooker coming in here is he's going to sit for a year. And just as we saw with Desmond Ridder, who I criticized that pick last year for the Falcons for this very reason, he's going to be just good enough that Detroit's going to be sitting there. Maybe they're picking 20th. Maybe they're like the Falcons, they're picking 8th. He's going to be just good enough where you say, you know what? We don't need to jump up for a quarterback. And even if a guy falls to us like Will Levis in the Falcons case, we believe in this guy just enough that we're not going to take the 4th quarterback in this draft, even if he's got more upside than the guy like Hendon Hooker. And the counter argument is it's a 3rd round pick. He's a good backup. If Detroit's smart about this, they can still make a move for a quarterback. But I think human nature would tell you they're going to be spending every day with Hendon Hooker. They're going to convince themselves that he can transition out of Jared Goff. And for me, Hendon Hooker has a Jared Goff-esque ceiling. And that is what you're trying to get out of for Detroit. So personally, you're trying to really build for greatness here. And not only did you not maximize the Jared Goff window by getting dynamic difference-making players at the top of the draft, but you're probably extending the amount of time that you're going to have a mid quarterback, someone in that 9 to 20 range every year, which is what you're going to have with Hendon Hooker and Jared Goff. So that's my criticism of this pick. It's not a value problem. There's a lot of value there in taking Hendon Hooker, but landing here was really underwhelming to me. Then they take Broderick Martin, explosive nose tackle with great arm length. I had a day 3 grade on him. I think it was a touch early, if I'm being honest. Again, B is not a bad grade. I think it was a solid pick. He could turn into a good player for him, but he does have a long way to go from a consistency standpoint. But you're talking about the end of the 3rd round, so a solid pick there. And then, they take offensive linemen out of William and Mary. I didn't have a lot of William and Mary's tape sitting around, so I will trust their evaluation on that one and say, solid pick. I really like the Antoine Green pick in the 7th round. This was one position that I really felt like Detroit should have attacked at some point. This was a really deep wide receiver class, even if you didn't like the top of the board. And you look at that Detroit wide receiver room, they did lose DJ Chark. And beyond that, you are putting a lot of pressure on Jameson Williams. I believe in Jameson Williams. But their depth just isn't that good at that wide receiver position. I wanted to see them add some real talent, but I do like Antoine Green. He played the Diami Brown role at North Carolina. He runs really good routes, really good deep routes, especially. He tracks the deep ball. He's got solid speed, solid size. So if you're looking for another kind of DJ Chark type of player, Antoine Green, I think, has a chance to be kind of a 3rd piece someday down the road. So I did like that pick at the end. But, I ultimately I'm going to give this a C grade. Yeah, the Lions got better. No shit, they got better. They had 1 million picks. They had 4 top 50 picks in this draft. Yeah, they got better. They did not maximize the value from this draft. I don't think they really got a single difference-making player when they had great opportunities to do that. You could have just done what the Eagles did. You could have had Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith and looked at this pass rush with Aleem McNeil and Aiden Hutchinson and be like, oh my God, we're terrified of that defensive line. You could have taken a great cornerback and paired him with Brian Branch and been like, look at how good this secondary is going to be down the road. Instead, you've got, a running back that, yeah, he's fast, but he doesn't inspire any fear in anybody. A run-stuffing linebacker with some range in the middle of the field, but not a difference-making linebacker. Solid tight end who isn't Michael Mayer, and a dime back who's a really good one. But I don't think Brian Branch is a game-altering player back there. He's just a really good player. So, I'm underwhelmed. It's my honest opinion. I've defended the Lions drafts in recent years, but I really can't get behind this one. So we're going to go C for the Detroit Lions. And then we have the Green Bay Packers. And, Brian Gutekunst just was so close to absolutely nailing this draft. I think when you look at the first 3 rounds being what really makes or breaks your draft, I think they did a remarkable job all the way down the board. To me, an A grade for all 4 of these top 4 picks. For me, I am going to get a little bit critical of what they did early day 3, where there was still a ton of value on the board. But let's start with these first 4 picks, which I really couldn't have drawn this up too much better for them. You know, when they took Lucas Van Ness in the first round, I love the value. I love the idea of, you know, him with Rashawn Gary. This could legitimately be one of the best pass rushes in the NFL in 2 years. I don't think that's really all that crazy to say. This is their type of guy. They've already shown that they can develop a guy like Rashawn Gary and get him to reach his potential. Lucas Van Ness is very similar. He's got crazy arm length and get off and pocket pushing ability. This is very similar as well, where when they took Rashawn Gary, they had the 2 Smith brothers there as starters, and Van Ness didn't have to necessarily make that impact right away. But he'll still play like Gary did in his rookie year. Rashawn Gary is coming off an ACL injury, so you get a similar type of player to play until Gary is healthy, and then you can also use him as like a 4-eye on the inside, like he played at Iowa. So to me, this was right around where I kept mocking Lucas Van Ness. Was 12 to the Houston Texans, 11 to the Tennessee Titans. So for him to go 13 to Green Bay, I think was a really good pick for Green Bay. And then I like even more what they did on day 2, because when I said when they took Lucas Van Ness, I said this gets an A for now, and we'll see what they do on day 2, because they need to get at least 2 playmakers for Jordan Love, and they got 3. And I am just obsessed with these picks. I think these 3 pieces are the perfect fits for what Green Bay truly needed. And I've seen a lot of people say, well, why did they take 2 tight ends? And I think that's a really lazy criticism. Number one is Green Bay loves 12 personnel. If you don't think they have room for 2 tight ends, number one, look at their depth chart, because it's a joke. It's literally just Josiah DeGuara, who was a horrible 3rd-round pick years ago, a case in point of an example of when a bad pick was made and you knew it on draft night. I think I gave that an F. It's him and nobody else. And you're talking about a team that is going to run 12 personnel probably anywhere from 15 to 20% of the time. So you're going to have a way to use these guys. You have complementary skill sets. You have a speedy burner in Musgrave, who does struggle to kind of put his hand in the dirt and get really nasty as a blocker. He tries, but there's a lot of room to grow there. And Tucker Kraft, who can really put his hand in the dirt and play physical as a run blocker, gets much more natural leverage. So Musgrave as the wing, as a slot wide receiver, almost in the Allen Lazard role. I mean, Luke Musgrave is a faster Allen Lazard, essentially, in this offense. If you look at the way Allen Lazard was actually used as a wing receiver, wing tight end, slot receiver, that's going to be the role Luke Musgraves plays. And then Tucker Kraft is going to be more of your inline tight end. Beyond that, look at the Baltimore Ravens going with the double dip strategy. I'm a huge fan of the double dip strategy. I've been consistent about that throughout my time as a draft analyst. The Baltimore Ravens in 2017 took Hayden Hurst in the 1st round and said, you know what? We also really like this Mark Andrews guy in the 3rd round. Turns out, just like anybody, myself included, you can't hit 100% on draft prospects. In fact, on day 2, you're probably hitting about 50%. So you take 2 of these guys and you guarantee almost that one of these guys is going to be a really good NFL player. And if they both hit, that's even better. And then you come back to Jayden Reed. They trade down a couple times, and some people are going to look at this as a reach. Jayden Reed was someone I really liked in this draft. I had a 2nd to a 3rd round grade on him, so him coming off the board at this point is perfectly in line with my evaluation on him. I actually had him graded higher than Jalen Hyatt, which was a little bit of a win for me to see him go before Jalen Hyatt. And I even had him graded higher as a deep threat than Jalen Hyatt, because unlike Hyatt, Jayden Reed is a little bit thicker. He actually runs through contact down the field. Jayden Reed showed both at the Senior Bowl and on his college tape that he can beat press with really rapid feet and a refined release package. And he's got phenomenal ball tracking ability. My high-end comp for Jayden Reed, as I previewed in my February receiver rankings, was Tyler Lockett. You think about the way Tyler Lockett at almost an identical size, a little bit over 5'10", 190 pounds, has caught all of those amazing moon balls from Russell Wilson, did it again with Geno Smith last year. Jayden Reed had limited opportunities because he was doing it at Michigan State, who does not have a dynamic receiving offense or passing offense, but he had the best deep ball consistency rate in the league as far as converting those contested catch opportunities down the field. So not only is he a great deep threat, but he played a lot from the slot. He showed great route running. He showed excellent route running, working and dotting up these cornerbacks at the Senior Bowl. So Green Bay didn't just need another vertical presence other than Christian Watson. Romeo Doubs can maybe be that guy, but they even more so needed a guy in the slot. It's why Jackson Smith-Njigba was such a popular target for Green Bay. You have such a wonderful diversity of skill sets. I think all of these guys make complete sense when you watch Green Bay's offense as far as how these guys are going to plug in. And you are now giving Jordan Love, I think, a lot of opportunity to succeed here. And my valuations, by the way, just completely lined up. True first-round grade on Lucas Van Ness. I got a true second-round grade on Luke Musgrave. I got a second to a third-round grade on Jayden Reed, and a true third-round grade on Tucker Kraft. So I thought the value on all four of those players was really good. Now, you get to day 3, and I do have some criticisms. It's not enough to ruin this draft or anything, but I think Colby Wooden with the 14th pick in the 4th round was a reach. I had him as a developmental kind of late day 3 guy, and again, I could be completely wrong, and maybe they see something they like here, but his pad level's horrible. He really didn't have a plan as a rusher at all. The biggest thing, like if I'm wrong here, it's probably going to happen where he's playing more interior at the next level. Auburn did run a weird system, and they asked him to play edge in his final season, and he had to do that at like 285 pounds. He showed some good quick feet and definitely some traits on display, but to me, the development wasn't there, and I just was not a fan of his tape. So to me, it was a little bit of a reach. It's not the end of the world. He has upside, so I understand what they were thinking there, especially if they're looking for kind of a 4-eye to play as a base end. But the next pick in the 5th round was like, this was the worst pick of day 3, honestly. Like, Sean Clifford, are you serious? Out of Penn State in the 5th round? Like, to me, the only way you can truly explain this is that you want like a cheerleader effect on Jordan Love, where he's watching Sean Clifford come in as the backup, and you're like, God damn, I'm good at quarterback, because Sean Clifford is fucking terrible. He just is. There was Penn State fans in the chat like, what? Like, my thing here is they almost assuredly just don't want someone to challenge Jordan Love, because the right pick here would have been to take Tanner McKee out of Stanford, who, maybe Jordan Love isn't the guy they think he is. Maybe he isn't the guy I think he is. But you get a good dart throw on Tanner McKee, who I had a day 2 grade on. I had him right in line with how I feel about Hendon Hooker. I think the Eagles got a steal in Tanner McKee. If you had to take Sean Clifford and you want to go with the strategy of, just having a horrible backup quarterback, and for all the reasons we described, don't waste a 5th round pick on that. Do that with the, 39th pick. Why are you doing that with the 14th pick? I just do not understand taking a 5th round pick, rolling it up into a ball, wiping your ass with it, and then throwing it in the trash. It's just really stupid. Really horrible process by Brian Gutekunst. And then Dontavian Wicks at the end of the 5th round. Look, I'm lower on him. I get it. I could be wrong. I thought his 2022 tape was really underwhelming. He really couldn't separate at the Senior Bowl, which was an issue to me. A bunch of drop issues have showed up on tape. He's a springy athlete. He run blocks. I get kind of what they see in him. I've been told his 2021 tape is much better. Personally, I think they're really going to regret not taking a bunch of much better wide receivers. Parker Washington, take a gamble on Kayshon Boutte, A.T. Perry. Even if you want a slow wide receiver who run blocks, take Xavier Hutchinson, whose tape is just much better, or get a little bit more athletic there too with a guy like Andre Yosevich. So those are just some names that I think they're going to regret not taking here. I don't see it with Dontavian Wicks, and I hope I'm wrong. But beyond that, Carl Brooks, I thought was kind of right in line with what Colby Wooden was as kind of a hybrid guy who played edge at the next level. Played edge in college, but is going to play interior at the next level. So they're going with the double dip strategy there. I get it. I think in the 6th round, that's a much better pick than Wooden in the 4th. One of those two guys, though, will probably turn into a solid rotational 4i for you. A kicker basically is a 7th round pick there. To me, that's when you take special teamers. I don't do special teams analysis, but I'm fine with it. And then I did think they made up a lot of value in the 7th round. So Carrington Valentine out of Kentucky declares as a true junior. He's a solid size, really good athleticism. I thought he was a physical player. He just is completely raw. But I did have a 4th to a 5th round grade on him. And I think he has the traits to maybe be a starter someday. So I really like that pick. Lou Nichols out of Central Michigan, really productive 2021 season. Decent athlete, wasn't able to do his testing for his pro day. He's coming off an injury, but productive player. We'll see. They do have a future need at running back. Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon might be in the last year of their deal, but not expecting Lou Nichols to take their job, but maybe as a backup could be something. Really love the Anthony Johnson pick out of Iowa State. For those that have been around the channel, comment down below if you've heard me talk about slot corners converting and playing quarters heavy hybrid safety systems at the next level. This is your model right here. Anthony Johnson has played 4 years of outside corner at Iowa State, went into more of a slot corner role last year, and now is going to be a strong safety or a safety in this system. I thought it was a great pick, man. I had Anthony Johnson as kind of a developmental starter, making that transition to the safety position. Really good instincts. I think he's a great scheme fit. Honestly, think he's going to be in the conversation for a starting position just because the safety group is so bad, right? It's Darnell Savage who got benched last year, Rudy Ford, Tarvarius Moore. I think Anthony Johnson is just about as good of a player as those guys. So don't be surprised if he's like a day one starter for them, unless they make any moves in free agency. That was another thing with those earlier picks. They had so many opportunities to take Chris Smith in this draft. I was stunned that they didn't pull the trigger. Chris Smith would have been a day one starter for this team in the 4th round. And to take Sean Clifford over him just pisses me off. But then with the 39th pick, they take Grant DuBose. I didn't have a draftable grade on him. I watched him. I wasn't a huge fan. I really hope I'm wrong. But I thought there was again other receivers that you could have gone a different direction, and I'd be surprised if he works out. But I'll be pulling for him. So overall, they killed it in the first 2 rounds. Absolutely killed it. But to me, wasting value in the 3rd day of the draft does ding this down to an A-. Most notably, the Sean Clifford pick. You flip that for Chris Smith out of Georgia, and this is a sensational draft. But that's a mistake that I can't endorse Goody for that one. But good work, Green Bay. Their best draft, I think, in probably 3 years. Then the Minnesota Vikings, who only made 5 picks, but they take Jordan Addison at 23. And I don't really have anything bad to say about Jordan Addison here. In fact, I think he's going to be really good. And if you wanted to give this an A because you disagree with what I'm about to say, that's totally understandable. But, my opinion on this is you, as a Vikings economy, whether you're the Vikings themselves or the Vikings fans, they have been so desperate for a key out of purgatory. And Will Levis falls to you at 123. And maybe you hate Will Levis and think I'm stupid for this opinion. But let's not act like he fell into the 3rd round. This was a weird draft. Joey Porter falls into the 2nd round. There's a bunch of reaches on day 1. Levis going with the 34th pick or the 33rd pick, whatever it was. Let's not act like the entire NFL hated him, right? To me, the Vikings really should have pulled the trigger on Will Levis. You get, finally, a high upside quarterback with a bridge out of Kirk Cousins that makes total sense. And I think Addison's going to be a really good number 2 wide receiver for them. I compare him to Emmanuel Sanders, and I really don't have a huge knock other than that key out of purgatory dropped from the heavens into your lap, and you said, we're good. We'll go with another year plus of Kirk Cousins with no true long-term plan at quarterback. I do think they're going to regret that. But, well, and the other thing is Addison's going to help Kirk play better and help you talk yourself into more Kirk Cousins. It doesn't sound like the worst thing in the world, right? And that's why it gets a B. He's a good player. I love how he fits next to Justin Jefferson. The other note I have is I think Joey Porter is a better football player. I think Deonte Banks is a better football player for them and a more important cornerback position. I think you could have gotten a good receiver that had a chance to be a number 2 guy with that 39th pick, taking a corner there and a wide receiver later. Just, if I'm being honest, I think if you were playing where the value was, there would have been a better play to be made there. But again, I am not hating the Jordan Addison pick. I just have some critiques. But you get to Mekhi Blackmon at the end of the 3rd round. I do think it was early. I really do. I had a true day 3 grade on him. He was my 25th corner. Looking back on it, Keely Ringo, Darius Rush, Jalen Jones, Jacorian Bennett, Terrell Smith. I could be completely wrong. But to me, those 5 corners that I just named are better man corner options that they could have had based on my own evaluations. I'm just being honest about what those evaluations were. It's not the end of the world. He is athletic, and if Brian Flores really likes him, he very well might be onto something. But I didn't think he was a very sticky corner. His reaction time was really poor. Now, they aren't going to run a ton of zone, but they will run zone, and he, to me, just didn't really find his way to playmaking opportunities from zone coverage, didn't really read out those route combinations and have that high zone IQ there. It definitely can be something that gets developed, but again, I just think there were better corners available, and I'm just being honest about it. But you get into day 3, thought they had a good Saturday here. They take Jay Ward, hybrid defensive back out of LSU. I think he's a really fun player, really fun highlight reel kind of guy, but you load up his tape and he's a little bit too aggressive. He's not always in the right place in coverage, but a playmaker who could be either a developmental safety for them or a true slot corner that might even compete for a starting job right away. He's one of these defensive backs that was kind of like the best player in their secondary, so they stuck him in the nickel and just said, go make plays, be aggressive. But I like the athleticism. I like his energy on the field. And at the end of the 4th round, I think was a solid pick. Love the Jacqueline Roy pick, sticking with LSU. I had a 3rd to a 4th round grade on him. I thought a lot of lesser talented defensive tackles came off the board before Jacqueline Roy. I think he fell because of consistency concerns, motor concerns. I don't like to do that on players, but you did notice it with Jacqueline Roy. Did a couple games on him. The first one, I was like, wow, this guy's a monster against the run. He had like almost Mazzie Smith-esque block shedding ability. But you watch the next game, his pad level's inconsistent, his hand placement is inconsistent. So there's a lot there. They just got to tap into it and get that out of him. But I could see him eventually being a potential starter in the NFL, so I thought that was a great pick. And then Jaron Hall, I really don't have a problem with this. He's a fun backup. He's got that quick, snappy flick of the wrist release. But for me, this was another opportunity to take a Tanner McKee, who to me has like legit starter upside. He's even stylistically similar to Kirk Cousins, and you could have had an opportunity maybe to see what Tanner McKee has to offer. I think Jaron Hall is a fun player, but he is a backup quarterback. And to me, this is like, we just don't want to disrupt the Kirk Cousins thing. And it's like, it's time to disrupt the Kirk Cousins thing. I think the Eagles took a dart throw at Tanner McKee for a reason, and I don't understand why the Vikings didn't. It's not a slight to Jaron Hall. It's not the worst pick in the world, but I think they will regret not taking Tanner McKee. Love the Dwayne McBride pick, though. A certified steal in the 7th round. I had a true 3rd round grade on Dwayne McBride. He was my RB5 in this draft. If they decide to move Dalvin Cook, or if Dalvin gets hurt again because he has a hard time staying healthy, I think McBride can be a better player than what Alexander Madison is for them. I compare him to J.K. Dobbins, where he is really good at creating explosive plays for himself. Excellent vision, excellent burst through the hole. The top speed isn't incredible, and he's not quite as fast as J.K. Dobbins is, but man, is he a fun watch. And to get him this late was really good scouting. I don't know why he fell so much. It could be that he just isn't this incredible athlete and that draft Twitter was just higher on him. But everybody that watched Dwayne McBride agreed, like, this dude is a menace at the running back position. Very similar to what Dameon Pierce was as a prospect last year. So I love the Dwayne McBride pick. There could be some medicals there that we don't know about. He wasn't able to test at his pro day, did get hurt at the end of his season. So that could be something to keep an eye on there. But if he's healthy, I think they got a certified steal there in the 7th round. So overall, I think the Vikings had a good draft. They get a B grade from me. Jordan Addison, I think you get an Emmanuel Sanders-esque number 2 wide receiver with the 23rd pick. I think it's a solid pick. Mekhi Blackmon, we'll see. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he balls out and becomes a starter, but I didn't necessarily see that in him. I saw him as more of a matchup corner, of a dime back that can match up with speed in certain packages, but the coverage consistency just wasn't quite there. Definitely got some value on day 3, though, that made up for a potential reach in the 3rd round, in my opinion. Overall, I give the Vikings a B grade and a very solid draft by Kwesi in year 2. So there is your NFC North draft grades video. Really appreciate you guys for watching. Again, please do drop a like down below. Drop a comment where you agree, where you disagree. Who are your some of your favorite undrafted free agent pickups that these teams made? Can start some fun conversations about those guys in the comments down below. If I see them, I'll try to interact and give you my thoughts on those players. But we're going to be doing the NFC East next, so looking forward to that, and we'll see you guys soon. These will be coming out throughout, the next 3 days, probably. We'll be all done within the next probably 60 to 70 hours. So peace out.